Contemplation, an excerpt from The Edge of Justice. Brenna leaned against the gelid glass of a southwest-facing window, watching deep shadows retreat from between the crags of snow-crowned mountain ridges in the distance. After sleeping soundly for many hours, the Lithian woman felt hemmed in by the cool concrete walls protecting her from the dying wind outside. A dull, dissatisfied ache crept into her soul, a feeling inspired partly by the culmination of her intense effort to reach the high land, and having done so, of not knowing what to do next. By All-Father's grace, she stood on Tamarian soil, but it had been her will, not his, to come here, and she feared that she might have made a grievous mistake. Woodwind's post-reunion scolding echoed in her memory.
You run away from your province like an irresponsible child. And to claim, by virtue of your survival, that the blessing of our Father has condoned such reprehensible behavior is little more than a rationalization to conceal the betrayal of your family. You're pursuing some demented fantasy about living up here at the emotional expense of people who love you. How could you treat your family this way?
You can be such a horse's hind end,
she thought angrily. The wound, inspired by her friend's accusation, stung in her heart, stirring dismal feelings worse than the guilt she already felt for lying to her parents. Brenna didn't want to follow Woodwind back to Cameron, yet despite their disagreement, his friendship meant a lot to her, and she felt she owed the man at least a tacit attempt at conciliation for his trouble. The first thing she didn't like about this idea centered upon the undeniable authority he would suddenly hold over her. As her father's servant, Woodwind's social status fell beneath hers, and additionally, she'd lived 3 years longer than he. Their friendship, already suffering because he'd successfully tracked her down, would certainly deteriorate further if she returned to Cameron in his company. He would never let her hear the end of his achievement, and she hated his continual attempts to prove his worth as a suitor. Even worse, she'd have to face her parents and admit that she'd deliberately defied their wishes. Because Brenna sincerely loved her family, the defiant act of running away, rather than returning as promised, filled her heart with ineffable remorse. She could not bear the fact that she had disappointed her Amer, especially since nothing had changed in her unwillingness to marry Lord Fang. She hissed. The thought of breathing air in proximity to that immaculately groomed but immoral excuse for a man disgusted her to the core. The Lithian woman loathed his greed for power and detested his character. She had no intention of returning to Cameron with Woodwind.
I'd rather die,
she muttered to herself. Yet the romantic land of Tamaria had proven colder than she expected. Brenna realized she could not survive in the wilderness by herself during the winter. Living off the land had become progressively more difficult with each step northward, as her memory of hunger testified. But Garrick warned that colder, darker days lay in the near future.
Garrick,
she whispered, turning from the window. Leaning her back against the cool concrete wall, she pictured his face in her mind, imagining the strong warmth of his embrace. Brenna closed her eyes as her heart quickened, wishing that the circumstances drawing them together didn't also present obstacles to drive them apart. Her eyes opened, and her lips drew into a tighter line. During their conversation the previous evening, she'd confirmed, to her dismay, that although Garrick did not repudiate her faith, he didn't see evidence of divine immanence and influence in human affairs. He believed in a universe ruled by chance and driven by natural forces, dismissing All-Father as a semantic label for things not well understood. She'd concealed her disappointment from him, but it had overflowed from her eyes and onto her pillow in the solitude and darkness after midnight. Brenna respected his view, even though it contrasted with her own. Lithian culture encouraged tolerance in principle, so long as his position did not harm others or damage their world. Still, she wished he shared her faith. Brenna spent much of her early morning prayer time trying to reconcile the undeniable attraction she felt for an unbeliever. The Lithian maiden craved his company, but the prospect of their friendship continuing seemed repulsive to people for reasons she didn't understand or didn't want to admit. She noticed how close proximity with him raised eyebrows. Touching hands, even incidentally, and speaking in the enemy's language stirred social scorn. Brenna had never experienced such disapproval before, as her musical talent, beauty, and the importance of her family ensured a measure of deference from nearly everyone. Tamarians, who knew nothing about her, judged the young woman based on her physical appearance and language, men by leering or catcalling, and women with either envy or disgust. She suspected that local people disdained racially integrated relationships, concluding that any serious affiliation with Garrick would not long be tolerated by those in authority. Nonetheless, Brenna prayed for Allfather's blessing, wistfully aware that neither the Tamarians, nor Woodwind, nor Garrick would approve.